Hello everyone, Zelrant here, and today I thought we'd kind of take a look at Suomi and kind of discuss her fortifications as well as her weapon, as she will be rerunning with the Dupes banner. So one of the big things, and I'll just say this right off the bat, if you're someone that didn't pulver her in the beginning or you've started after her banner, her V0, I will put her at a top priority pull for just about anybody. She is the single best sustain in the game, even at this point. I know we have Cinerisi coming up. I'd put her above Cinerisi. And then even when Springfield comes out way down the line, she's a really good sustain. But the big thing that Springfield also provides is damage amplification. Nobody comes close to Suomi in terms of the sustain capabilities. So if you don't have her, I will say this is a must pull at this point. Now, when it comes to her fortifications, we'll take a look at her fortifications first and then take a look at her weapon and kind of go on what I think the order would be in terms of if you're going to want to make her better and better over time. The first one is, I think everybody knows about it when the game first came out, was her V1, because I think a lot of people did pull for it, which includes myself. And the big thing with the V1 is it kind of fixes the one weak area she has within her kit at V0, which is the lack of heals. Now, her shields are super good and super tanky, but with that lack of heals, if the shield gets broken, she's not going to be doing much in terms of being a hellier team. Now, when you actually look at it here, we can kind of go through it on the skill point here, or the description here. Increases the number of stacks of avalanche by 1. So the skill here, her ultimate basically puts some stacks of avalanche on the enemy. 3 stacks there. And then when you get 5 stacks of it, it will do 8 fixed stability damage. So it's just a nice little additional stability damage that you can get with that. With the V1, it basically makes it go to 4, or no, I think it's 3 stacks, because this is already including it since I have the upgrade. So that makes it where it's going to be much easier to do that stability damage within 2 turns, because you'll get that 3 off the bat, and then you can get the additional avalanche stacks on her other skills, or a follow-up ultimate down if you do it that way. So just a nice little bit of extra stability damage there. But the big thing is right here, where it recovers HP equal to 30% of Suomi's maximum HP, and restore stability index by 4 points to all allied units. That is massive, because it covers the whole field. It does a mass heal to everybody, as well as giving them a little bit of their stability back. And that will be what makes it where you can pretty much sustain indefinitely if you know what you're doing on pretty much any content. If you have her in the platoon battles, it makes it trivial, because you don't even really need a sustain on the boss battles. And it basically makes it where you don't even have to worry about at all there. So you have that nice there. And then they gain 1 additional stack of Wintry Bastion, reduces the damage taken by 30%, maximum of 5 stacks. Expend 1 stack upon being attacked. This is considered a freeze buff, and cannot be cleansed. So just a really nice reduce of damage, and you get you can get a good chunk of stacks on that if a person's not been attacked a lot. This one is really good on, this is really good for someone like Macchiato, where Macchiato has her own version of a shield, and she does not want to lose that shield for doing her support actions, and thus Suomi's can basically makes it where she's much more defensible with her own shield and can continue to keep it above. And then, and then if it's considered a freeze buff, which is nice for triggering any freeze buff related conditions under anything. And then if the allied is at full HP before being healed, they gain an additional 1 stack of Shelter. Shelter is gain stability protection, reducing stability damage by 2 points. Each instance of damage consumes 1 stack. Nice thing there is she already puts shields on them, so they're going to be, in a good chunk of, majority of the time, your teammates are going to be at full health. And in that case, you're going to get that additional stack of Shelter, which is going to make it where it's harder for the enemies to break their stability. And if they can't break their stability, it's going to be much harder for them to break their shields. So it just kind of makes them just super, super tanky overall. And then it has continuous healing, which restores 10% of maximum HP at the end of action. And it is for 3 turns. Really nice there. Just a little bit more healing. Overall, great skill, probably one of the single best V1s. There's some that I probably would say are better in the game, but one of the better ones ultimately fixes any issues you have with Suomi's capabilities of keeping your team alive, because shit can heal. And this one I would put a top priority to pull for if you have the pulls and you're even if you're not going to go heavy into the ice team, this one is going to be really nice to have her as your generic sustain for any content. It makes it where you can auto a lot of content and not have to worry about micromanaging them if they put themselves in stupid situations where they're going to take extra hits. So that's one reason I really like this, is just because it made some of the more easier content a little bit easier in just being able to auto it. But it's not going to save you in some of the more difficult stuff where they are kind of stupid with that. But then we'll kind of take a look at her segment 2 fortification, because I think a lot of people did pull V1. And so I've seen questions on people now asking about segment 2 of the fortifications. And this is one where now it's going into increasing the damage of your teammates, and more specifically the frost damage. So if allied units have a frost barrier, so when shield or frost barrier, so basically our shield is up, apply Wardening Light, which increases freeze damage dealt by 15%. This effect cannot be cleansed, so they get that. This effect, and the effect of a Sleep Adrift Sprint is enhanced, increasing the range by 2 tiles. And so that is her support attack, so it makes it where she can do her support attack over a longer range. Now, Suomi's support attack is nice in more just doing a little bit of stability damage and a little bit of damage, but it's nothing too crazy. The big thing that most people are thinking about here is this Wardening Light buff, because this is what basically gives just a flat 15% damage increase, and it's really nice for Macchiato. And I've actually even had people ask me if it's just better to pull over her V2 versus getting Dush, because Dush is kind of, at this point, without the expansion key and heavy investment, not going to provide a very significant increase to the overall DPS of your ice units. And so this one is just a straight improvement on Suomi. But to me, I would not take this V2 over Dush. Having more units is just better, and we know Dush is going to get the expansion key that's going to make her better in the future. And while, yes, you can get this on Suomi and then kind of backfill with another DPS like QJ or someone else to actually do more damage in the long run, once we get the expansion key for Dush, she's going to be great. And we'll get that probably earlier than when Cian's got it. And she's still going to be great now, regardless of what you're hearing from other people. Yes, if you are someone that's free to play, that's looking to min-max your count, in this case, I wouldn't pull over V2 Suomi or V0 Dush. I mean, that's the case. I would just not get either of them if you're going to be in that situation. You just kind of want to skip them. But this is a little nicety if you're a little bit of a decent spender. You already are going to pull Dush. You have your V1 Macchiato, and you're wanting to go heavily into ice. I think this is a good pickup. Now, the other thing, before we go into the other fortifications here, the other thing I want to take a look at now is the weapon, because I think this is where the break point of deciding whether you want to get the weapon versus more stacks of her fortification if you're wanting to go into more of that whaling territory on her. And so we take a look at the weapon here. I did pull over her weapon, and the big thing that you're getting out of the weapon is this freeze damage dealt by allied units is increased by 10%. Her purple weapon gives you the shield stuff already. The value of applied shield is increased by 10%. So if you need more tankiness, you can already get that with this part. It's not as much, at least currently on mine, but if you have this maxed out to the full amount of stacks, I believe it gives the same amount of shields. So you'll be able to increase her sustain capabilities with her purple weapon, but her sustain is already good enough that that's not a key reason to get it. And then you can get another additional increase to it if your stability index is greater than 0. She's already great. To me, I don't care about those shields as much. The bigger thing was that increased the freeze damage percent. And so if you don't get this weapon, her better weapon or her alternate weapon is not actually her purple, but it is the actual battle pass weapon. And the big reason you'll want that is just simply because an elite weapon comes with this attack percent boost here. You could even use the free Papa Shah one you get from the platoon battles, because the big thing, you're just wanting that attack boost when it comes to your weapon at that point. But I would say the best one, if you're not going to go over the weapon, would be Classified Manuscript. And when comparing the two, you already get the attack boost, so you're not going to pull her weapon for that. This one actually increases her own personal damage. She has a lot of movement, and basically you can almost always get this pretty easily, this 25%. And the other big thing is, if you're going to be spending and getting the battle pass every single patch, or every new battle pass, you will be able to eventually get this to 5, a copy of 5. And when you get that, I believe it goes all the way up to 50% defense ignore. Versus, you're definitely not going to want to pull dupes of your own weapon because it doesn't really increase it by that much to make it worth it. And so, to me, there's not much of a difference. And so, unless you're a decent amount spender, I would not actually pull her weapon. Because the shields, they're nice, but I don't feel like they're needed at all. The big thing you're pulling for is the freeze here. So, unless you're going heavily into the freeze team, I think this is an easier skip. And I would not, if you're going to pull V2 versus this, I would say you pull the weapon over a V2. Simply because having elite weapons, even though it's specific to Suomi, you can throw it on any other SMG user as well and kind of get the same buffs. You never know if we'll get another shield user that's ice in the future. So it's always nice to have the weapon in that case versus going with the V2 fortification. But for the majority of people, I'd say you can skip both of those. Now, when it comes to your other ones, I'm just going to kind of quickly go over these. These are all whale territory to me. I don't plan to pull for them. I'm not even pulling for V2, and I've got a decent amount of pulls from spending on the game, and I'm not even going to go over her V2. And the farther you go down, they're really not too much to it. And we'll kind of see it real quick. So at this one, her Snow Gray skill, which is another one that puts a little bit of a shield and heal on a teammate's adds. Now it has impact response 1 on it, which means after being attacked, Suomi gains 10% of maximum HP considered a buff. Nothing crazy there. Like they're already tanky enough. You don't really need that. And then for each surrounding large enemy unit, apply 1 additional stack of defensive support. Increases defense equal to 30% of the player's base. So just a nice big overall defensive buff. Like I said already, you're already getting plenty tankiness out of Suomi. A lot of the content at this point, I will say it's at this point, is DPS checks versus sustain checks. And this is true all the way through what CN currently has. Now, there is a new difficulty that's going to be coming out that may make sustain more required. But currently at this point, and for the foreseeable future, for us at least, right now, sustain is not as important. You just need to keep yourself alive, which she can do at V0 or V1. And then it's all about damage. So this is just defense. So nothing crazy there. And then now you're getting a V4. If it causes stability break, so if her attack causes a stability break, increases fixed damage to 125% of defense. So it makes this do a decent amount more damage, but she's not your damager. Macchiato does the damage, and this isn't going to make a difference in your damage to me. So nothing crazy there. Her 5th one, additional effect, Warding Light, increases freeze damage dealt by 15%. And then, it's also making it better. Is added when attacked. If Frost Barrier is not broken, inflict 1 point. So if they don't break your shield, it does a little bit more stability damage. Support actions now trigger an additional. So she can now do 3 support actions. And then recovers 1 point of stability index for other allied units within 4 tiles. So this one, the nice thing, this one is nice in the fact that if she's around your teammates and she's doing her support actions, it looks like it's going to be all about getting your stability up. But like I said, it's more defensive stuff. It's nothing really on that DPS side of things, which is what you're needing more than anything else, because she's already good enough as a sustain. You don't need this additional sustain out of her. And then you have the 6th one here, and this is this one is the biggest of all of these, going to the but it is all defense still. Applies defense up to 30% defense to all allied units for 3 turns on the ultimate. So now they just get more defense in terms of a buff. Increases the number of cleanse debuffs by 2, so now she's going to cleanse them even more. I have not run into really any situations where I needed more cleanses than I'm already getting. And if you're really needing to deal with cleanses, there are other options. I believe, I have to re-look at her kit, but Cinerisi, I believe, does better on the cleanse side of things anyway. So if you're needing cleansing, you're just going to need... Cinerisi may be the better unit for that anyway. But the big thing, though, is it now also cleanses ones that it originally didn't, which is Fear, Infatuated, and Stun. And then increases restored HP by 50%, so a bigger heal. Her Frost has a bigger area that it covers, and the effect of shield is enhanced by 30% up to a maximum of 150% of the target's max HP. So now the shield can like really super buff your team. And so mostly pretty much all defensive stuff here. And like I've already said, it is not needed. Your V1 is already amazing. I think most people that have pulled it already know that. There is really no reason to go any farther than V2. V2 gives you that increased frost damage, and that's really, if you're going to want to be a light or dolphin spender, that's where you stop. Everything else is just way too much extra on there, and sustain at this point is not that important, because even when I'm autoing some of the hardest content, the problem isn't that they're dying. The problem is they're not doing enough damage generally, or because like the AI is not very smart on applying the damage in the correct order. And so they're not dying, they're just running out of turns, or they're not killing everything is the problem. So everything is good with Suomi on that. And so that is kind of just some of my thoughts on Suomi, on whether or not you're going to want to kind of go pulling into your fortifications. It's really not needed. V0, I know a lot of people that have V0 now are starting to think about getting V1. V0 is not absolutely needed on her. Don't feel like you have to get it just because a good chunk of people did, especially if you don't have that many pulls. Because I would say when we do get Cinerisi coming up here in the future, I would put her at a higher priority to get her V0 versus getting Suomi's V1. Because Cinerisi is going to be a core member of that burn team. She's a great healer, as well as having a bunch of other stuff in her kit. And I'd rather have more flexibility than just improving the one unit. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it. Some people disagree with me. Some people agree with me. We'll kind of have to see. If you disagree, go ahead and tell me your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like my content, if you could like, comment, and subscribe, it really helps. And thanks for watching.